So first of all, thank you all so much for coming. This is the third installment of our SingWell speaker series, where we talk about the science and practice of singing. So we're very grateful to Kathy, who's been initiating this endeavor and connecting with all of the researchers and the singers and the practitioners. So thank you to Kathy. I'm Arla Good. I'm director of the SingWell Project, along with Frank Russo, who's unfortunately not able to join us today. For those of you who don't know, SingWell is a partnership project. We partner with 50 leading researchers and partner organizations, all with the same mission of understanding and promoting and advocating for group singing for different populations, for those who are living with communication challenges. The partnership grant is housed at Toronto Metropolitan University, though our partners span the country and beyond. Actually, our speakers today are all from the United States. We're about halfway through our grant right now. It's a 7-year grant. We're halfway through. SingWell aims to bridge science and practice. So it's as much a knowledge generation grant as it is a knowledge mobilization grant. What I mean by this is we conduct studies. We are researchers. We conduct studies investigating the psychosocial and communication benefits of group singing, and then we mobilize the knowledge. So we communicate it to the communities that we know can benefit, whether that's individuals who are living with their communication challenges, their practitioners, choir directors who are looking to enhance their practice. We're trying to create best practice guides so that there are more groups like this around the world, so that more people have access to group singing because we know the benefits and we want to share those with other people. So to do this, we rely heavily on our partner organizations to help us spread the word. A great example of this is we do a monthly speaker series, which you're all here for this reason. And for this, we're very grateful for our partnership with Choral Canada, who've been helping us launch this initiative. So that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to pass it off to Kathy, who's going to be facilitating this conversation with our lovely speakers today on aphasia and singing. Thank you, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you, Arla. Hello, everyone. We're so happy that you're here with us today. Just a couple of little housekeeping things before we begin. When you logged in today, you may have noticed that captions and language translations are available to help you follow along a little more easily. Catherine is going to just pop some instructions into the chat to help you set that up if she hasn't already. Okay. We will be having a question and answer following all the presentations, but this may take us beyond our 1 o'clock end period that was on Eventbrite. So just if you're not able to stay, that's okay. We will be sending a transcript of all the questions and answers to you at a later time via email. If you do have questions as you're listening, just pop them into the chat and then we'll make sure that they're directed to the appropriate speaker at the end of all the presentations. Okay. Before we do start our presentations, we would like to acknowledge that First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples have been making and sharing music on these lands since time immemorial. On behalf of the SingWell Project, we recognize the privilege of living, working, and creating on their unceded territories. We honor their stewardship and are inspired by their ongoing legacy of creating community, connection, and healing through song. So again, thank you for joining us here today. And we want to get a sense of who's here to take part in this conversation about group singing and aphasia. So Catherine's going to pop a poll onto the screen. And just if you can take just a minute to fill that out, it'll give us a better sense of who's here. We'd really appreciate that. Amazing. Wow. Looks like we have a lovely cross section of professionals or professions, perspectives, and people here today, which is actually what this seminar series is all about. Exploring that vital intersection between research, practice, and experience related to the benefits of singing with others. There's so much that takes place at that intersection, but it's rarely explored in one place. SingWell believes that building a meaningful bridge between science, practice, and lived experience creates the synergy required to harness the power of group singing to promote well-being and communication throughout the world. And this speaker series exists to help build that bridge. Our researcher today is Dr. Jessica Richardson from the University of New Mexico. Yay! And it looks like all of everyone in attendance is from North America today. I didn't see anyone beyond North America today. Although anyway, that's where we're from. Jessica's research interest is acquired brain injury, specifically focusing on aphasia recovery. She also pioneers innovative treatment approaches that consider the role that community participation can play in that recovery. One of these innovations was establishing the UNM Neurochoir in 2016 with her co-presenter, Nicole Gallegos. Featuring a remarkably prescient early adoption of early choir technology to remove barriers to participation, this choir offers a music-based social approach to build community for people recovering from brain injuries. We're so happy to have you here with us today, Jessica. And while Jessica is presenting, if everyone can just make sure their mic is muted, we would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Nicole's going to be sharing our slide deck, but we are very happy to be here. And also thanks the committee for patients getting in touch with us and kind of herding all of the cats over the holidays. Um, while we also just had a lot of things in life going on. So this is just our opening slide introducing the series, and the next one is what this specific topic about, which is singing and aphasia. And very happy to be here with my former student, now friend and colleague, and the one who helped me launch the choir, and also with one of my very first choir participants, Brian, who helps out, I think, with every research and outreach opportunity that we have at UNM, and also with Nicole's choir at Healing Harmonies. Just a quick disclosure slide. I don't think you guys asked for this, but I didn't want to get into any trouble just in case I forgot it. But you can read it. I'm not going to waste our time because we have lots to cover, but these are the disclosures. So I just want to start out just by commenting on the historical fascination with singing and aphasia. And also want to thank my colleague, Ellen Bernstein Ellis, who I just saw is on here, for pointing me to some of these great quotes. But as you know, as many of you may know, aphasia is an acquired neurological disorder that impairs a person's ability to produce or comprehend language. But many people with aphasia retain the ability to sing familiar songs, sometimes even when their speech and language is severely compromised. Even if they're global, have global aphasia, if they're almost completely nonverbal or only speak with stereotypies. And this has really intrigued researchers and clinicians for centuries, leading to many different theories and therapeutic practices. And for the next slide, I just wanted to kind of show you the bigger picture of aphasia and also kind of open your mind to thinking about other disorders, oftentimes that people with aphasia live with. When they have most often a stroke that's going to lead to this aphasia, they may also have sensory deficits, visual deficits, physical deficits, cognitive deficits. And so this brain injury can lead to these deficits in body function. And I think, as we all know, and either from firsthand experience or from working with these folks, that this will reduce activity and life participation, career and volunteer opportunities, hobbies, leisure, fellowship, spirituality, relationships, health and wellness, which can lead to psychosocial issues, including anxiety, depression, and social isolation. And then the next slide is what these things lead to. Is that just having had a stroke that leads to aphasia and other comorbid conditions increases your risk of having another brain injury, a stroke or a TBI. Having psychosocial issues that arise from the stroke and the aphasia and other comorbid conditions, leading to the anxiety, depression, social isolation, also leads to a higher risk for another brain injury. Also worsens the deficits that happen because of the first brain injury. And so you kind of see just all of these things that kind of feed on each other in very negative ways. And what I'd like to highlight on the next slide is that what is not talked about enough is the effects on the caregiver. If the person does have a caregiver or care partner in their life, oftentimes their activities and life participation are also reduced, which can lead to their own changes in their body functioning, and also psychosocial issues, and increases their risk for a stroke or brain injury or other health conditions just for that experience, and oftentimes strain and burden of providing certain caregiving duties, or not duties, that's a terrible word, but functions or care. How about we say that, providing care? So, all right, so on the next slide, there's also been a historical recognition about not only just music, but the arts in general. So here's a great quote. Again, thank you, Ellen. Art, music, dance, mime, and creative writing have long been recognized for their potential in promoting healing and personal development. Onset of aphasia and mobility difficulties can often severely constrain opportunities for participation, as I just mentioned, and enjoying cultural activities, further heightening the sense of inclusion. And moving on. I wanted to give the broader picture of why the arts in general, because when you read the literature about this, oftentimes music is kind of merged with the arts in meta-analyses and systematic reviews. But from a resource standpoint, we know, especially more so in the United States compared to Canada, there's a significant lack of resources for rehabilitation for individuals living with brain injuries. And in the US in particular, a significant lack of care at all for how people live after they live with a brain injury, as well as for their care partners in terms of coping and health support. We know that we need more research. We've made advancements in rehabilitation for the past, 100 years for aphasia, but we still have not come close to optimizing recovery, not even close. In terms of the arts offer a very promising avenue for rehab and can also enhance impairment-based treatments by promoting emotional expression and resilience, fostering social connections and community engagement, stimulating cognitive functioning and creativity. The added benefit here is accessibility and affordability. Many artistic activities can be arranged affordably and are accessible, providing valuable support to those in need of additional options, enhancers, and other. And so what I like to try to challenge people is, instead of asking why the arts in rehab, we should be asking why not. So moving on to the next slide. So why music and why singing? And here is another great quote. The potential for singing to promote health and well-being has been considered for thousands of years. Current efforts are poised to generate new scientific knowledge about the benefits of singing and music across the lifespan, ultimately advancing the potential of music to improve all of our lives. And so a couple of bullet points that are not quotes about why music and why singing is that we know that language does involve the whole brain, but there is a definite left hemisphere bias for language processing for most people. Music activates many brain areas more bilaterally and more symmetrically, and many of these areas overlap with left hemisphere language areas, potentially supporting them when they are damaged. And they also involve right hemisphere areas that may be more effectively recruited to support language. Another bullet for why music and why singing is that music experience in the form of singing has the added advantage of activating areas involved in motor preparation, coordination, etc., of the same body parts that are involved in spoken language production. And this last bullet point here, singing may promote neuroplasticity in stroke and brain injury recovery, and may also offer, and this is really critical, neuroprotective benefits from brain atrophy that occurs at a greater rate in people aging with stroke and brain injury versus typically aging adults. And I want to pause here just for a moment, because we now know we're learning more about aging with stroke and aging with brain injury. And we know that about a third of people who have had a stroke specifically will also develop vascular cognitive impairment or vascular dementia. And so this is more of a progressive decline and a progressive atrophy that arises because of a stroke and or chronic cerebrovascular conditions. And so even if it's not going to kind of evolve into a vascular, or not evolve, add on that extra component of a vascular dementia, we do know that people age differently. Their brains age and atrophy differently, and at a greater rate than people who are typically aging. And there is evidence that shows that singing can help kind of combat this and slow that down. So moving on to the next one, the next point here is just talking about the different types of music intervention, or just mentioning them. There's not a lot of time today, but there's many different types of music interventions. There's music listening, including even just appreciation and talking about music. There's music or instrument learning and or playing. There's studies on composition, on improvisation, of course, singing individually or in a choir. Rhythmic interventions, music-based speech and language activities, probably the best well-known is melodic intonation therapy, and then also music combined with other modalities, such as an impairment-based treatment, with imagery, with visual arts, with dance. So this is just kind of, when you look at systematic reviews of music interventions, oftentimes all of these things are kind of put into the studies that they're looking for to see about the effectiveness of music interventions. And this is just a study that I just want to point out. Obviously, this is not choir, it's just music listening, but even just a music listening intervention. So it was a minimum of 1 hour a day for 2 months. There was a listening diary. The music was programmed by a therapist. What they showed were changes in the connectivity, both structural and functional, in the left hemisphere language areas, and it was associated with better recovery of language skills in stroke patients. And this was above the effect of listening to audiobooks, which is, kind of, right, auditory reading. And so even just that had more power than just listening to an audiobook. So to the next slide. There was a couple of reviews that were just looking again at how all of these music interventions helped, and this wasn't specific to aphasia, but it did include people with aphasia, which is nice, and I'll make a comment about that shortly. But there were all kinds of different studies that were thrown into this review, or these reviews, and what they found was improved gait velocity and cadence, improved stride length and symmetry, improved upper extremity function, improved overall communication, like functional communication, repetition, and naming. Importantly, comprehension doesn't seem to kind of show up as significantly improved, but from a research perspective, I think it has more to do with how they're measuring it rather than whether or not there's actually change there, and improved quality of life. And so, across the board, a lot of the issues that people with aphasia deal with, not just their communication, but a lot of the other things that are going on because of the stroke or the brain injury, we're showing improvements because of different music interventions. In terms of specifically why it helps communication, we know it provides practice with speech behaviors or spoken language behaviors. We've got the breathing, phonation, the volume, the articulation. We also know, again, historically, spared musical abilities can be used to help rehab speech and language skills, and it provides communication opportunities that people might not otherwise have. And in terms of the psychosocial, we also have more and more evidence that during music participation, the brain releases neurochemicals that increase feelings of pleasure and alertness, and that relate to decreases in anxiety and depression. And again, those socialization opportunities and peer support and social skills. And we'll probably get into talking more about that later, and maybe with Brian. So going back to this slide, you can see all of these things that happen, which is not just the language disorder in aphasia, but many, many other things, including this reduction of participation, these psychosocial issues. Music kind of touches on all of those things. And I would really challenge you to name many other things that do that all in one package. So moving on to the next slide. I know I'm moving quickly, but again, there's lots to cover. Why singing together? Why choir? And this will transition to actually talking about doing choirs with Nicole. But we know that there's a psychological benefit of group leisure activities, including choir, that offers opportunity for improvement, skill mastery, or sense of accomplishment. So that's an important thing that group activities, including choir, offer that individual activities don't necessarily. There's the added benefit of the activation of brain networks, of brain systems and body systems, articulators and muscles that are commonly used for speech and language, and or that can potentially be newly recruited for speech and language, while also synchronizing with others and interacting with others. And again, I would challenge you to identify many other speech and language treatments that really do that holistic package that people with aphasia need. And you would have a very short list, and choir would probably be at the top of it. And also a recent study by actually one of our hosts here and her team, group singing compared to singing alone leads to greater improvements in mood and increases in oxytocin. And a thing that excites me about this type of research in people with aphasia and for people with aphasia is that some of you on this call may not be as familiar with the research challenges that we have with people with aphasia, but they're often left out of research. And so you have all of this intensive research for people with stroke, but guess what? People with aphasia are often excluded, and people with aphasia are about 30 to 50%, depending upon who's counting, of that population. Even just a simple pharmacological intervention that involves taking a pill, they're excluded because they can't, because of their language comprehension or language issues. Brain stimulation studies, they're often excluded. Exercise interventions, they're excluded. I mean, all of this is ridiculous. And it's just really quite remarkable and terrible and honestly lazy that they are excluded from these studies, because very simple modifications can allow them to be able to contribute to this research. And so I actually get excited when we're thinking about singing, because in the world of singing and choir, they're actually kind of sought after, again, because of this historical fascination and this historical recognition of the relationship between music and language and singing and aphasia. And while we haven't mentioned it specifically, I just want to bring it to your attention before I pitch it over to Nicole, is that I focus mostly on stroke, and TBI as the cause of aphasia, but there is a different type of aphasia, and this is primary progressive aphasia. And this is due to a dementia. It's a dementia syndrome. So basically, it's like an atypical Alzheimer's type or an atypical frontotemporal dementia type that leads to aphasia as the most prominent and first symptom. And though there's not a whole lot of choir music research in that group because it's a relatively new diagnosis. These things that we're talking about apply to them, and the dementia research around music and singing apply to them. And I expect that we're going to see research in that area grow quite a bit as well. So this next slide is just a whole bunch of links. I'm going to pitch it to Nicole. Make sure you go and visit these because we need more research in singing and aphasia. And here's some really great resources for you to pursue research that's existing, research opportunities, funding opportunities, and more. And now for my FRA League, Nicole.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Richardson. That was kind of a perfect segue into talking about kind of more practical application and what we're doing for actually leading a group. And I know a lot of people here are already leading singing groups for people with aphasia. So I just wanted to share kind of our journey and what has been working well for us and kind of what we're striving towards as well. So Dr. Richardson already went over this a lot. So the main reasons for group singing for me is that social connection. I think there's such difficulty with finding hope sometimes, especially after the more severe diagnoses that we see, like the primary progressive aphasias, Alzheimer's. In the group I work with, we have a lot of neurodegenerative diseases and disorders that we see, all the way to cancer diagnoses. And these are all, most people are affected with aphasia to some degree. So I feel like the social communication, that enjoyment, boosting someone's confidence, those are all directly impacting how well someone can communicate. So although communication is probably the number one thing I'm working on as a speech language pathologist, I feel like finding that hope, finding that connection and enjoyment of life together is what fosters that. So just a little bit about me to help understand, I feel like the kind of where we're at. I feel like my whole life has been guided by music. I started out as a music instructor in 2004 as a young adult, and I taught piano and voice passionately. I opened a music school here in New Mexico in Albuquerque back in 2006, where we had 16 different instructors teaching all different types of music. I had a children's music program at that time where we would sing and dance, and the kids performed at all the different charity events and community events, which is interesting because a lot of that skill set that I did back then, I apply to what I do now, even though it's a very different population. When I started teaching voice, I had an opportunity to start working in the music industry. So I started touring with artists back in 2012, and I had the opportunity to there's a picture right here. I was able to perform with a band over at Fenway Park in Boston, and I had the opportunity to be on a lot of different albums and sing and kind of get that more intricate idea and aspect of what happens in the music industry, again, which has been helping a lot with what we're doing, working on legal rights for music and trying to put together and disseminate the materials we're using for these choirs to be able to get it out to people around the world and take out that difficult part of how to get these choirs started. As I began touring, I was working with a lot of ear, nose, and throat and otolaryngologists who specialized in the voice. And that's actually how I heard about speech language pathology. So I wanted to be able to scope artists on the road, to be able to check on their vocal health. And so I thought, well, I don't want to go back and become a doctor. So I think that the easiest way to do this would be to become a speech language pathologist who specializes in voice. So I was living here in New Mexico. So in 2014, I went back to school and started my journey to become a speech language pathologist. I met Dr. Richardson, I believe in 2015 in an undergrad class. I think it was probably neurology at the time. And that I vividly remember a class in 2015 where Dr. Richardson said, I have this idea about starting a choir for people with brain changes. And to be quite honest, I didn't even know really what that meant at the time. My focus was on singing and voice. And, but I went up to her at the end of class and said, I want to help you with this because, I'm passionate about music. Right around that time, my brother was actually diagnosed with brain cancer. And that, I think those two worlds coming together, along with meeting Dr. Richardson, really transformed the way my life trajectory. So I graduated in 2019 with my master's degree in speech and hearing sciences and speech language pathology. I continued touring at that time, pretty much full time. I worked PRN at a hospital and started working with adults with different neurological conditions. And then on the weekends, I was usually flying out to different places. Until 2019, I was actually on my way to the airport to go on a tour with someone to Canada, of all places, and everything shut down with COVID. So in 2020, I opened my private practice here, where in New Mexico, I'm in Choral, New Mexico, and I heavily focus on people with neurological changes, specifically that affect voice and swallow. So back to when I was at UNM, University of New Mexico, Dr. Richardson, I had the opportunity with her in 2016 to help start the first neuro choir. And I didn't realize how rare that was, until after. I knew that there were aphasia choirs. I think what's unique about Dr. Richardson and what she does is that she is focused on a wide spectrum of people who've been impacted as an adult with an acquired brain change. So I think we started with about 20 members, Dr. Richardson, something like that, and it grew. We began doing some community events. Here's some pictures of some different performances. The top one is at our hospital here. We had the opportunity to perform. We did some other local community events back then. And then in 2019, when I graduated, I stepped away and Dr. Richardson kept that choir going. And then with COVID, I think she had moved it online. And then I was kind of traveling a bit more at that time. So when I opened my private practice up, I knew I wanted to keep going with the choir. So in 2022, I started a neuro choir called Healing Harmonies. We developed this as a 501c3, and our mission is we're dedicated to helping people living with brain changes through the power of music and community. We started with 8 members, and now we have over 50 members that meet with us every other week, and we're growing. I mean, it's incredible, just the growth that we've experienced. And something that I think I mentioned earlier, but my main goal in what we're doing with our nonprofit organization is figuring out how can we take what we're doing and disseminate it so that other people can start choirs that are similar to this and make it easy. So I'm working with some of my friends who are in the music industry out in Nashville to get the legal rights figured out on, the lyric books and the music. So we can say, hey, you want to start a choir? Here you go. Here's everything you need. I just want to support you in that mission. So we're figuring it all out, but we have a wonderful board of directors who are helping with that mission. Just some kind of practical things. This is our schedule. So I try to keep what we do very organized. So I have our website on there. We have our 2025 rehearsal schedule, working with people who've had a brain change or aphasia. We try to keep things very consistent. So, I put out the schedule at the beginning of the year and we stick with it all year. We rented out a performance space that's beautiful here in New Mexico for our end of the year concert. I would say one of my biggest goals is that I want people who are in our choir to feel like if they've lost that hope of, I have nothing to give back anymore, I don't know what I'm doing, I want them to feel like I have something to give still. I can inspire other people. And so we try to perform at a lot of charity events that can help give that meaning. And I think that's a huge part of what we do that's important. This is just an idea of what we're working on. This is our new songbook. We actually just started rehearsals this week, actually, on Tuesday. And so these are some of the songs we're doing. We stick with mostly very well-known songs. And again, this is the tricky part with the legal rights, because if we're doing a bunch of songs that are public domain, we don't have to worry about that legal rights, but those typically tend to not be as loved, and they don't spark those memories as much. So as much as I want to do Yankee Doodle Dandy, which would be a public domain song, I want to keep these songs that people love and that inspire memories. And so I'm sure all those of you who are leading choirs right now understand that difficulty with the more popular songs and legal rights. So our typical schedule for us with Healing Harmonies is we typically start with a warm-up. These times are a bit off. We go for an hour and a half for our rehearsals. So we'll do about 10 to 15 minutes of a warm-up. We do speech therapy type exercises. In the choir I'm in, I'm familiar with everyone's diagnosis. And so I do try to put together exercises that will help everyone, but we do a lot with breathing, with relaxing muscles. The warm-ups will do semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, straw phonation, different things to help different diagnoses. And then we'll go into our core songs. We usually will sing about 5 to 7 songs, depending on the difficulty. We're doing a lot more of round singing right now. We use a lot of visual aids. Every person in the choir gets a 3-ring binder with a schedule and with the entire songbook in there. We try to put everything in sheet protectors to make it easier for our people with fine motor and motor difficulties to be able to flip through the page. And then that's their notebook that we'll just update each year. And then we end with a cool down. Tips for leaders, it's be patient. I think anyone who works with brain injury or brain changes or aphasia knows you never know what's going to happen sometimes. So just be patient, roll with the punches, use a lot of nonverbal cues, encourage participation. As Dr. Richardson was saying, just listening to music can have a huge impact. And there's a lot of people who say, I can't sing, or I'm afraid to sing, or maybe they had a vocal fold paralysis, things like that. So, we just try to modify it. And I just say, just come, just be a part of this, be around people who understand what you're going through, because so few people understand what you're walking through right now. For me, adaptability is huge. I play piano and sing, and then we have a guitarist who's usually there. So thankfully it's a little easier to adjust that way. I think it's harder if you're not playing the music as you lead, but there's a lot of different ways you can adapt things with tempo apps and transposition apps, all of those things, and then incorporating rhythm. So I think rhythmic instruments can help, clapping, things like that. And again, like this, we went over this, but we do a lot of sing-alongs, substitute lyrics. In the lyric books, I try to put arrows for following, visual cues in there just to help with that difficulty with aphasia, and improvising melodies. So that is everything I had there. I talked pretty fast too. So I think we're going to pass it off to Brian next, who is one of our amazing singers, just a beautiful human being. And I've known you, Brian, as well since 2016, I think. And I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Nicole. Again, my name is Brian Sisk, and I'm 56 years old. And I had a I had a stroke in 2016. I worked for IBM for a long time too, 24 years. And the stroke really set me back. And I didn't really participate too much anything for the first year or so. I was I was rushed to go back to work, and it was just a bad it was bad for me. And then I met I had to take my I had to go to my follow-up visit, and it was at UNM. And I went there, and I think I saw somebody with a flyer or a flyer or something that said, you know, neurological singing. And uh, I still didn't go. I had to wait another. I waited like another half a year or a year before I was ready. Uh, but boy, has it helped. It First of all, I didn't like it, and I hated it, but I knew that it helped me get my words out, and so I kept going, and eventually I started to like it then, and I like it a lot. And it's weird because I go to different study groups. No, no, they're not study groups. Uh, Everybody can go to them, but what's it called?
Support groups.
Support support groups. That's a problem with aphasia. uh, I go to two support groups, and one's a stroke support group, and that was pretty good. And then I go to another one that's called Retrain My Brain, and that's the one that saved me. I think I started going to that one uh, probably like ha- about 7 years ago. I started going to that one, and it saved me. I had issues with uh, oh, I just had issues, all kinds, and it was weird. And but finding this choir made my life easier. I talk more. I get out more. I don't isolate myself or anything. I I have a walking group on Fridays, and um, I get a massage every other week. that and that's paid for by the brain research, the brain Burke brain
The Brain Injury Resource Center.
brain injury resource center. Yes, yes. And that really relaxes me and makes me, it relaxes me. It really does. But I would say singing really helped everything. And I don't know what else. to say. Um,
Can I brag on you just a moment, Brian?
if you want.
Well, because I have seen the evolution of you coming out of your shell to the point of, hating choir and kind of like rolling your eyes every time, right? To like you've participated in our reading groups, like our game groups, like, you look for opportunities to make sure that you can interact and socialize and practice language, to stroke camps
Yeah.
that we've gone to, which have
Oh
been
yeah, I forgot about that.
amazing. If you can get a stroke camp in your area, please do it. They're so amazing. But please advocate to have a SLP there, because most of them run without speech language pathologists. To you initiated this walking group, and that's where the brag is, to where you got to the point where you're like, okay, well now I'm going to start something that is going to help me, but it's going to help other people as well.
Right.
And that's just been amazing. And I think some of the issues that you were talking about, correct me if I'm wrong, with retraining your brain were your short-term memory and your attention problems that you were having,
Yeah.
that have also really improved
Mm,
through all of these different interventions that you have found for yourself.
yeah. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, sorry, Jessica, go ahead. I apologize.
No, I think I was going to pitch it to you because I figured you'd facilitate the Q&A.
Well, let me thank all three of you for like these tremendous insights and just the authenticity of everything that you've shared brings home to, I think, to myself, and maybe I can project that onto others too, the real value of what happens when we sing together. And Jessica, I really appreciated your explanation of why the arts and why not the arts. To see that in one place and articulated so well was really helpful, because I am a practitioner, and so it was just really, really helpful to see that. And thank you for bringing your research and the research of others into the conversation around how music benefits, but also the ways in which singing benefit people who have acquired brain injuries, and seeing the crossover to other types of communications challenges there's just so much there that you've shared that I think would have value for anyone looking to develop a choir for someone with singing challenges or with communications challenges. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Well, and I
And
think just talking, if I can follow up about the
yes.
developing, one of the things that I am passionate about, that Nicole is passionate about, and that we want to share everything. I've been doing this choir for a while now. We have so many resources, so many recordings of Nicole's, to help practice, so many of our own, kind of unique warm-ups and things like that. We're not trying to sit on it, right? We're trying to share it. The problem has consistently been finding a place to house it. So, I mean, I have Google Drive links, Dropbox links, things like that. I've even talked to Aphasia Access about housing it, and there's barriers to just like putting it all in one place. And so that's definitely something that we're hoping to solve. And then, Nicole also, we were just chatting recently, and I love this so much, is, really working on the copyright aspect and making things free and available to people, but also like having them sign an acknowledgement or an agreement that, okay, this is free to you. You're not allowed to profit off of it. You're not allowed to charge people for these groups, things like that. And I just, that's just such a passion for both of us. And again, all of these materials, I have it all for choir, but like for reading groups, I've been running those forever. Like we want to share everything. It's just a consistent barrier of like, well, where do we share them? Where do we house them? And so, I just want people who are on here to know that Nicole and I can't be the only ones who are just as passionate about sharing, and that the more conversations we can have about the logistics of that and actually how to make it happen, I think the sooner we'll get to be where we need to be. So,
That is really to a large degree what we're doing here today with this
yeah,
series, and bringing in those perspectives and knowledge base and acquisition of all of those resources that someone looking to lead a group would benefit from tremendously, and also the research basis of that too, the reasons that we would do it. So thank you so much for that, and we will chat.
yeah, yeah. Ellen had a question for Brian. Uh,
Yes.
so, Brian, what can we do to help people feel ready to join a little sooner? Do you have any ideas?
It takes time. The person has to be ready to go if they're going to go or not, and that's what matters. You gotta wait. You gotta mention it to them, and then wait on them, and then see what happens, and just keep pushing. And don't you don't I don't know why I want to say the word nag. um, uh, as long as you keep pushing, and it's in their brain, they they'll go when they're ready. You can't make somebody go sooner. That's my feeling. That's
Gotcha. So for you, it seemed like a very like a personal, I don't know that the
it's
environment.
very personal,
Yeah, so the environment wasn't that it wasn't welcoming or anything like that. It was
right?
like I'm just not ready, or this isn't for me, or had you ever done a choir before?
Yeah, I did one in the seventh and eighth grade,
Gotcha. Okay.
chasing girls.
Different motivation. That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but that's all I did, and that's when I found out that I could sing, and I
Mm,
had a voice that, like you guys were saying, was a little bit lower than the other people. That's yeah, that's when I found out.
gotcha. Thank you, Brian.
Hmm.
Ellen had a question about journey with online versus in-person versus hybrid choirs. Ellen, that's that's quite a thing. I online was definitely very much needed and good when we had to do it. I think it was a lifeline for people during COVID. And then I think what I know that we found since then is that we learned that for some people, it was a lifeline that was not previously available, that is still a lifeline to them now, and they need it that way. They need that modality, they need that accessibility. But for some people, if there's any other choice than virtual or online, they will do it because being with someone together, just the musicality aspect of it too, but just, being with someone together is just so much more preferable. So it really kind of depends on who they are, and here in New Mexico, where they are. Where it's um, the population here is mostly rural, and so for some people, it's their only option is to do something online. But I think, as we all know, there are challenges with that. But I think you might agree, Brian, when we were doing like our karaoke sing-alongs and our holiday and our virtual meetings, that they were fun. Like you ended up having fun, but maybe just not as
Yes.
fulfilling.
Yeah, I did for a while. But I didn't. I'm the guy that needs interaction. That's that's what I need. And that and this the singing online almost made me quit, and it was really tough. No, 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 no. Mm, no. Sorry.
That is okay.
Um,
Did you want to keep going, Brian, or I could talk about another question someone asked?
you can go ahead. I
Okay.
forgot.
You're amazing. Thank you for sharing your perspective. You honestly, Brian, when I think of you, it's one of the main reasons I want to keep going, and just you inspire so many people. I don't even think you realize that by what you
No,
do
you
and who
don't.
you are.
I
Okay, I'll
don't.
stop embarrassing you. So regarding the legal rights and people saying, where can we get this information? Um, we are working on that with Healing Harmonies. So we're a separate nonprofit entity. And that's probably one of the biggest focuses that I want to see happen over the next year is let's get the legal rights figured out for these songs people love, not just public domain songs. And so you can go to our website, Healing Harmonies NM, which is New Mexico, nm.org. I'll put it in the chat too. And just keep an eye out there because as we get that, we will release it. Something that I'm working on with our choir members is recording each of them singing different songs. Oh, sorry, I think I just texted that or sent that to one person. Let me try again. Is recording all their voices so that way we can put that out there. So we'll be, that's a whole nother legal right. Oh gosh, sorry.
And I put the lab website on there too because we have a resources tab that will continue to grow, and it'll lead either to a Google Drive or a Dropbox where you can get the things that we've developed either for research or just to have a good practice. So even PowerPoints, like virtual PowerPoints for warm-ups and things like that.
Yeah. And, I think if you're leading a choir where it's just you and in a small group setting, legally, technically, we do have to pay for rights just to even have lyrics. But I think there's some grace with that when you go out into
I hope so.
public and you're releasing, things on YouTube and the places like that, then you need to get more serious about those legal rights. But if you're out, like we do a lot of performances out in public, and typically where we perform, those venues have the legal rights for performing the music. It's just when it comes to our own personal recordings where we're changing things. Yeah.
Awesome. Let me see if we have any other questions from our attendees that have been sent to us directly. Nicole, who I want to mention also was awarded with the 2024 True Hero Award from New Mexico Magazine. So for the work that you do in your community. So well done. Thank you for sharing that, sharing your light and your passion and your knowledge here. One of the questions we have is, what would you recommend as a starting point for someone who would like to form a group, a neuro group? And what are some barriers to watch out for?
So I think if you're a person that says I have a passion for this, but you don't know where to start, I would probably try to connect with some other rehab specialties in your area, maybe like a speech therapist, speech pathologist, or physical therapy. If you have a graduate school program, start there, a music program, just to start getting the word out. The main thing is you need a meeting space. You're going to need, if you're a musician, guitar, piano works great, or just have a Bluetooth speaker or something like that to start. And then, I would keep it simple to start. Pick 5 to 10 songs that are well known and start with that. And what was the other question, Kathy? Or was there another part of that? The barrier?
Yeah, what the biggest barrier to just to kind of watch out for, things that might dissuade you from doing it, when in fact, if you just push through, it'll all be okay?
I think just, mentally preparing that it is time consuming, especially at the beginning, and it can be exhausting as you figure it out, but keeping in mind why you're doing what the why of it. And,
Mm.
for me, I'm a big person of setting goals and seeing those accomplished. So, you
And I
know,
remember, I remember several times, Nicole, we would both be so exhausted. Me from research, Nicole from studying or whatever, and we would be so exhausted like 10 minutes before it was time to start choir. But every time we left refreshed, we left happier. Like, so it's just kind of, committing and getting there, I think.
and
And
setting, yeah. So go ahead.
well, I just think a challenge that we have too, because we open ours up to a broader range of neurological deficits, which is going to be different from having an aphasia only choir, which I have research initiatives for that as well, or Parkinson's only choir, is, brain injury does different things to inhibition and impulsivity and language and personality and, behavioral outbursts. And, that it's not a barrier, but you need to have the expertise to deal with that, and you need to be prepared to deal with that. And it's not always smooth, but it's always worth it.
Mm.
Yeah. And for me, a big thing, because I'm a mom and I have my private practice and just all those different things I'm trying to balance in life. And so I have to be really careful to say, I am willing to dedicate, 5 to 10 hours a week. I can handle that much. But I'm careful to set the choir at a time where it works for me, where I can be consistent. Um, so, with Jessica, when we were doing the choir, it was in the evenings. That's really hard for me. Just so we do meet in the afternoons. And unfortunately, that does cut off some people being able to attend if they're still working, things like that. So there's just a
Right.
balance of that, trying to
So you
figure out
need
what's going to
to,
make it functional for me to keep it going versus, yeah.
right. So you kind of start off with the long game in mind, and with boundarying your time and your personal resources and energy. And that's
Mhm.
actually really, sometimes we forget about that piece, but
And I
that
would say,
really,
if I had tried to do a choir like this before I became a speech language pathologist, I wouldn't have been prepared to. So, I think if you're a music-based person first, just try to partner with someone who is a speech language pathologist or do some trainings, because I think what I would have still made a difference in what I was doing, but it would have been significantly more challenging. And I don't think I would have been able to benefit people as much. I mean, what I learned from Dr. Richardson has really transformed everything I've done. So um, it's not, I would say still do it if you're, but try to get that expertise as well.
right. Did you want to add something, Jessica?
I, I want to add, make sure that they're a qualified speech language pathologist. We still struggle
Sure.
with speech language pathologists who don't have the training that they need from a neurological perspective to be able to support. So it maybe should go without saying, but unfortunately, I think it still needs to be said.
Someone has asked in the chat, are there possibilities of partnering with local healthcare facilities for networking, et cetera? Which is a little bit what, Arlo was speaking to at the very beginning. Those partnerships are really valuable. Have there been partnerships that you have found to be really valuable in growing your practice?
From the UNM side, we are heavily communicate heavily with several hospitals, and they send people to us. They're not interested in. There was one hospital at one point that was trying to have their choir out, I think, towards Rio Rancho. But for the most part, it's either been me from a research or outreach perspective here in UNM, with people being sent to us from those organizations, or Nicole with hers. I mean, that's pretty much it for the whole state. And it's going to be
Wow.
us that's going to change that for the whole state. What I find with healthcare facilities is that they're just really busy and really overrun. One advantage that I have here is that I am involved with our new Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, and we have initiatives for programming for people with dementia and related disorders, and for caregivers. And so, for at least those populations, and because I'm involved in that, those initiatives will be partnered with the ADRC, and that will grow. But I think it's really dependent upon people like us on this call to just have to kind of beat the doors down and beat the drums and make it happen. And Nicole, you might have an additional perspective there. You've
I
partnered with the city, which has been like, you've got some stuff going on like with the city or community organization, right?
You know, for us, it's really been mostly word of mouth. When we first started, I did go to different neurologist offices, and I would give them our calendar. But a lot of neurologists are so busy, and they're not really sometimes thinking about that rehab component as much. So hopefully that's going to change. But really, for us, it's word of mouth. We grow every single week. We get new members through people sharing, and then we've gotten a lot of media attention recently. We were just invited to perform at our New Mexico Disability Rights Awareness Day at our state Capitol building, and then we're doing we have a semi-pro baseball team. We're going to be performing at one of those events soon. So I think, you get the word out and people are excited, and then they're telling all of their neurologists, they're telling their PCPs and other people about it. And then it's just sharing.
I think that you mentioned at the end of your session, Nicole, about the why.
Mhm.
That can really kind of get you over those humps. And it seems to me that one of the whys you've identified today are people like Brian. And Brian, in the chat, what we're seeing is just so much appreciation for you sharing your experience with us, because that's the purpose. As Jessica said, we are all in our own ways united in this, whatever our professional perspective might be. We're all united in wanting to help people improve life, improve their well-being, and improve their lives. And what you've spoken to today is how that has done that for you. And there's just a lot of appreciation for you, for just sharing that, for your sharing the authenticity with vulnerability of your story, and it's much appreciated here. So thank you for standing in today as the why for people who practice, and also for people who do the research.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for that. One question I have for you, and then we have a couple of other questions, is what did you hate about being in the choir? I know you didn't like it, but that was just,
Just telling people. Even my wife was weird. I would say going to choir, and it didn't click. See, I played football in high school and baseball and stuff, and singing was not in my forte. And but now everything that I've learned, it is now.
So there's some barrier around the language, or some assumptions about being in a choir that were a little bit of a barrier for you, and maybe for other people too. If you knew someone who would benefit from belonging to a group that you belong to, how would you encourage them to participate?
I I wouldn't. I would just talk about it to them, and just keep talking about it, and just, eventually, if that happens, you're going to change their mind. They're going to be, all right, let me see what he's talking about now. And they'll go, and there's so many people there, and they're singing and laughing and everything. And it's amazing. It's
Right.
amazing.
So you lead and advocate by example. which is fantastic. Another question that we have, thank you, Brian, is do caregivers participate in either of any of the choirs that you're referring to today?
Yes, caregivers do. Yeah, we have a lot of people actually, husband and wives come in with their uh, husband or wife who has Parkinson's. You know what I mean? They're, and I think that they like it too.
Yeah, I would say that's a huge part of what we do. We want to be 100% open to any care support person because there's so much depression that can hit that person too. And so anything we can do to support the caregiver is going to help support the individual as well.
And I think
Mhm.
that's so definitely informal, family or friend caregivers are they've always been encouraged through, both of our choirs. But we've actually had like paid caregivers who love it.
Mm.
So like it's their favorite part of the day. They're being paid to bring their, client or patient, and then they sing along with us too. And so it's really kind of all caregivers.
Which is another improvement in well-being and
Yeah.
community connection. Julie has asked how you fund these projects, your choirs. How are they funded?
Through sweat equity. From a research perspective, some of it has been research based, but that doesn't always translate to like a choir that runs all the time. That's for that particular research project. From a research perspective, what I try to do for larger grants is I do build in an outreach budget. And I include funds for outreach initiatives, including education, including screenings, but also including things like this. It's very small, and you have to be very careful with it, but it's critical for the type of research that we do. And then just most recently with the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Again, I'm the co-lead of the outreach recruitment and engagement core, and we wrote in these types of initiatives to provide support for people in the community and caregivers. So we have like a creative writing push that there's going to be offerings there, and also a music arm, and in addition to education and screenings and all types of things, and donations. But most of the time, I think it's has been historically kind of free labor until you find a way to get some funding. I know Nicole has gotten some money at one point from the city, but Nicole, let you speak.
Yeah, mostly it was my husband and I sat down and we just said, well, I said, this is what I want to do. And he said, I'll support you. So it really was it was funded out of my office. So I have a private practice. So a lot of it was funded that way starting. Thankfully, it really doesn't cost too much to start a group like this outside of your labor and time. Now, as we're getting bigger, we spend at least $2,000, probably rent out a really large, beautiful performance space at the end of the year. We raise money through, we do a silent auction at our end of the year performance, and then I apply for grants. So there's different grants. I'm really not a good fundraiser. I'm actually tragically bad at asking for money or help. So, but we have a board of directors. They're helping with raising that. We're going to apply for some state grants and state funding to keep growing it and support. But for me, it's just a personal passion project that I volunteer my time for.
Wonderful. I think we have one more question, if I'm reading this correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Catherine. Ellen asked if you want to talk about any outcomes that you'd recommend, recognizing that this could vary depending on research and focus, on what your community funders, et cetera, but wondering about outcomes that you would recommend for others to consider.
From if you're doing a research project with this, or just to check on the health of your group,
I'm
to
not
make sure that
sure.
yeah.
Ellen, if you're there, you can maybe unmute your mic and I'm not sure I'm asking your question correctly.
Well, I just find the question of how do we capture what we do come up a lot with both community groups and university groups for people to say, I'm having so much fun, I almost feel guilty. How do I capture that this is helping? And so, yeah, I think we really do struggle in the arts to capture the value of what we're doing. And it's really, and especially with people with aphasia, where the access, as you know, to the measure might be a barrier. So I just wondered if you had any tips or thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, you know I do.
We're
'Cause
so fortunate, Jessica. We're very fortunate. Yeah.
oftentimes we kind of get it wrong. I think it depends on who you're trying to talk to. If you're trying to convince, the world of medical providers, then you're going to have to speak in their language somehow. But it also needs to be that you're actually looking at outcomes that matter to the people who are in the choir. And I think that's where we get it wrong. I don't know that Brian could care less if he did another task where he's naming some dang pictures, but he does care about how he talks with people in conversation, or how he navigates when he gets stuck. And those aren't the measures that we use oftentimes in research studies. So I do think more functional communication, and I'm not talking about can they say yes or no and ask for the bathroom. That is not functional communication. I'm talking about talking, and conversation and discourse and communication confidence, quality of communication life, quality of life, and eventually also hoping to and depression. I could keep going on, but also hoping to get to the point where we can look for uh, where we have a catalog of biomarkers that don't place a huge burden on our participants, but that we can get information pretty quickly, to show that, hey, this is moving them in a direction that they want to go. But I think if we're asking the patient or the client or the participant, the best way to figure that out is just to ask them. They'll tell you if they're enjoying it or if they think that they're getting better. And it may not track with a naming measure or a verbal fluency measure or a discourse measure. But if they feel that they're getting better and that this is worthwhile, then dang it, they're getting better and it's worthwhile. So, I think it again really depends on what the context is and what it's for and who it's for. And yeah, involves probably a whole different session on measurement.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, I got a little country on you guys there with the dang it, but
I liked it.
Brian, I would ask you, would you agree that that's the most important measure, is asking you what you think, asking people what they think?
Yeah, I guess when yeah, I would say yes because I kept looking for when when we went into the rut and the neuro choir went away on it
Virtual.
went to virtual Zoom.
Yep.
Uh, we tried a lot of different things, and I was asking people if they heard about a neuro choir on this side of town. I live on the west side of town, in fact, and we don't care about what happens on the east side of town. No, I'm kidding. But uh, yeah, I would think that I would say that yes, I would start asking. If you had a feeling about singing, I would ask if you heard of a neuro choir. I
Yeah.
would.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we can hear here and from all of the energy here as well, and I've actually got to go in a second, sorry, is that choirs are doable. You have people who want to help you with materials. You have people fighting about to help with the legal aspect of these things. That choirs are valuable, that they help, and that if there's anything else that you need to convince that this is worthwhile and that this is helpful, then you haven't been listening. That's my summary.
It's a good summary. It really, it's a great summary. On behalf of the SingWell Project, I would like to thank Brian and Jessica and Nicole for coming and sharing not just their information, but their passion and their life experience in terms of what it is that drives and sustains and brings joy to a group singing experience for people with acquired brain injuries. So thank you so much for that. We just really appreciate it. And I know I'm seeing in the comments that are the people who are with us in this conversation today too have appreciated that as well. Yes, indeed. Applause all around. So thank you. Just a couple things before we do sign off for this conversation. There will be some follow-up information coming your way via email. This will include a little information request and potentially participation in some of our research request. And also to let you know that our next conversation will be on group singing and stuttering. And Dr. Simone Falk will be one of our speakers, and we'd really love for you to join us. And that's it from us for SingWell today. Again, thank you to our presenters. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your just for articulating so well what many of us know, but to hear it again in this context, in this conversational context, was really powerful and informative. So thank you so much. And
thank you, Kathy, for your ongoing dedication to these speaker series. You always facilitate it so elegantly. So thank you for everything that you do for SingWell.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I wish you all a happy Friday and a good weekend. And I hope we see you back here to share some love on February 14th for our group singing and stuttering session. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you.